Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Denmark once again, and we're going to continue on with this little mini-series of reviews that I've been doing for you recently that I've entitled Crazy Beers for 10 Years. And the idea behind this is, of course, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Rampant Lion Reviews being live here on YouTube. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today comes from a brewery that has featured on the channel many times before. We've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, many different styles, and I think it is most definitely fair to say that this brewery are one of the most recognisable Danish craft beer brands across the world. But the beer itself is a style that I've had from this brewery many times before. It's also one of my favourite sub-styles of beer, actually. And this is from a series that they do that is very, very well respected. And come to think of it, it may well be the very first beer that I bought from that series, but I just never reviewed it. And I think I got to the point with this one where I thought, yeah, this could be a really nice beer to keep for one of the major anniversaries of the channel. And so here we are, opening this one up to take a look at it. But yeah, needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Copenhagen, the Danish capital on Sjælland in the eastern part of Denmark. We're going to return to the famous Mikkeller, and we're going to have a look at a beer from their Beer Geek range. So this particular beer is the Beer Geek Vanilla Shake. It comes in at 13% ABV, and this is yet another Imperial Coffee Stout. So yeah, if memory serves me correctly, I bought this beer from the Brewdog bar next to Marshall College in Aberdeen back in 2012 or 2013. So I've been holding on to this one for a good 10 years at least. And yeah, it should be really quite interesting to review one of these at this point, because we've reviewed a couple of different Beer Geek beers from Mikkeller on the channel over the years, and this one should be a very interesting comparison. So yeah, the Beer Geek Vanilla Shake at 13% ABV. This must be the 2012-2013 edition, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, hopefully this is an absolute beast. And from what I understand, this particular version was brewed at Lervig Bryggeri in Stavanger up in Norway. But let's crack on then and see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Mikkeller before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future because I do enjoy trying different things from these guys. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Danish playlist along with a number of other things, and we will of course add to that over time when we get the opportunity. But yeah, check out the playlist of beers from other countries as well, but you will find some very interesting things in that Danish playlist. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then to tell you once again about Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery. So, Mikkeller, as I've told you before, was founded back in 2006 by Christian Keller and Mikkel Bjergså, who combined their names to make the brewery name, and the company is now run exclusively by Bjergså, who actually used to be a physics and maths teacher. Christian Keller left the company in the very early stages, mainly because he wanted to have a kind of core range of beers, but this wasn't the direction that Mikkel wanted to take, and so Christian went on to work for Soundhouse magazine in Copenhagen. But these guys were, of course, very influenced by the American craft beer movement, and they basically started out as the homebrewing experimentations of Christian and Mikkel, and it grew from there. But for a long time they didn't have their own brewery, but brewed at a variety of host institutions in America, Norway, Scotland and Belgium, and most of their beer for a long time was brewed at the Proefbrouwerij in Lochristenhoofd, just outside of Ghent in Belgium. But they were brewing substantial amounts of beer at Brewdog in Scotland and also at Lervig Bryggeri up in Norway. But their home base for a long time was the Mikkeller bar in Copenhagen, and they also have a collaboration bar in the city with Toul, whose founders are former students of Mikkel's, and that is the Mikkeller and Friends bar in Vesterbro, if I remember the district correctly. But these guys remained as Gypsy Brewers for quite a number of years, but in April of 2016 they took over AleSmith's former brewery in San Diego after they moved to a larger space, and then in 2017 they announced that they were going to establish a second brewery in Citi Field, which is home of the New York Mets in New York City. But the New York brewery closed in October of 2020, and it was announced in August of 2022 that they would cease their brewing operations in San Diego in the US too. But they have a location in Copenhagen which is called War Pigs. This started off as a collaboration with Three Floyds from Munster in Indiana, just outside of Chicago, over there, but this is now independent as of 2021. But there is also a War Pigs USA brand that is owned exclusively by Three Floyds Brewery. They have a location in Copenhagen called Balhavn, spelt like kind of Baghaven, but this is where they experiment with different sour beers. They've got a number of oak fodders up there that range from 3,000 to 7,000 litres, and they've got about 50 different 225 litre California Chardonnay barrels in there to age the beers. But they brew the beers down at the War Pigs brew pub, and then transport the wort up there to be aged. But they can do lots of different things up there, such as isolate different yeasts, and they've been doing that quite successfully over the last little while. In more recent times they have been brewing a number of beers at Toul City, which belongs to Toul, formerly owned by former students of Mikkel Bjergsos, and they've been doing quite a little bit of sour beer aging in there and things, from what I understand too. But over the years they've continually expanded their bar network. They have locations in Barcelona, Madrid, Berlin, Warsaw, Bucharest, Stockholm, Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands, Tokyo, Seoul, Taipei and Shanghai, as well as various locations in Copenhagen itself, San Diego and Bangkok. You do have things like the RampantLionReviews restaurants as well. Those are in various locations in Copenhagen. There's also one over in Malmö, or two over in Malmö now, come to think of it, and I think they are looking to expand that a little bit further afield too. But yeah, Mikkeller over the years have developed many different beers. I think they've produced well over 1,500 recipes at this point in time. But yeah, they are probably the most recognisable Danish craft beer brand. I'm not sure about by volume. Total might well have overtaken them at this point. But yeah, Mikkeller have done really great things when it comes to the Danish beer scene, and they inspired a lot of people to get into the craft beer market there as well. But yeah, that is probably everything that I can tell you about Mikkeller for the moment. If you want to learn a little bit more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see really kind of old school Mikkeller style on this one. In fact, you know, it's kind of interesting to see Mikkeller in a 330ml bottle rather than a can these days. But yeah, it's, as I said, this one was brewed at Lervik Bryggeri in Stavanger in Norway. It doesn't say actually when this one was. It doesn't say when this one was bottled, but it looks from the impression on the top there that it may well have been hand capped, which is proper old school actually. But yeah, the label on this one is of course designed by the legendary Keith Shore, and it looks absolutely great. As we mentioned earlier, this one is a 13% Imperial Coffee Stout, and yeah, it's from 2012 or 2013, something like that. But yeah, you can see the Mikkeller guy on the side of this one. So definitely cool to be able to open up this beer and have a taste of it for my series of 10th anniversary reviews here. But let's do this. Let's see what this one's all about. The Beer Geek Vanilla Shake at 13% ABV, an Imperial Coffee Stout from Mikkeller in Copenhagen. Let's do this. Ooh. Look at that pour. That's crazy. Not too much in the way of sediment on the bottom of the bottle there, and I don't see too much visible in the glass. I don't see any little bits floating around and things, but you could see that the pour on this one was, for want of better words, thick as fuck. That was pretty awesome, I have to say. But yeah, you can see that this beer has poured pretty much as you would expect from any Imperial Stout. Not much in the way of a head on this one, and I mean, the beer is probably about 10 years old, and Imperial Stouts, unless they've got a bit of wheat in them, they don't tend to give you that much of a head in the first place. But yeah, you've got a nice little bit of a kind of foamy, wispy, dark tan, bubbly character on this one. You can see there's just a little ring of different colours. There's just a little bit of a ring of foam around the edge of the glass there, but it looks really nice, very small foamy bubbles, one or two bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, but yeah, not really much visible in terms of the carbonation in this one. So yeah, colour wise it's pretty much as you would expect, a lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will of course affect the colour of it too. But when it comes to an Imperial Stout, it's very, very difficult to affect the colour of this beer. You know, the presence of the black malt is going to dominate the overall colour of the thing. But yeah, if we shine the light through this beer, not much in the way of transparency, but it does have a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi coloured edge to it. But appearance-wise, nothing particularly surprising about this beer when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's go on then and just have a little look at the aroma of this one and see what it's all about. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away, the aroma of this thing is absolutely beautiful. It's just great. I love Imperial coffee stouts, and a big part of the reason that I got into this sub-style was because of Dugas Brewery in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast. These guys did a number of collaborations with Hunter and Sons Coffee Roastery in Bristol in England, and you know, the key and the Sidamo Dintu, this just really got me into this style. And when I come and try things like this, it's just awesome. I mean, coffee beans as an adjunct in craft beer, they're so diverse. They're almost as diverse as hops. And yeah, you can get some awesome things out of these beers. So yeah, when it comes to Imperial coffee stouts, I'm just a huge, huge fan of this this particular style. And this one smells absolutely beautiful. This is almost, I don't know if it's because of how old the beer is, but the aroma that I'm kind of getting out of this one now is like a combination of a very smooth, silky Imperial coffee stout, but it's got huge kind of Imperial milk stout type qualities to it as well. Yeah, you've got big silky chocolate in there, you've got the nice coffee bean, you've got a little bit of fruitiness, you've got a little bit of woodiness and leathery character coming out of it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful aroma. One thing to remember is that with Imperial Stouts, the two things you can really do with these beers to make them like big and sticky or really complex is to either double up or triple up on the mash. So that's going to give you a big sticky mouthfeel and very, very bold flavours and aromas. But if you do the longer wort boil, it's going to give you the kind of leathery and drier character and lots of different complexities. So I'd be curious to see what the brew sheet of this beer actually is, and just and see exactly what they've done with this one. But it smells absolutely beautiful. So let's break that aroma down for you and just describe it a wee bit more in depth before we actually go on and taste the beer. But yeah, this one isn't barrel aged or anything like that, of course, but it smells really nice. I mean, the backbone of this beer, you almost have this lovely, smooth, oaky type character in there, but then above that you have a really nice kind of almost, would we say, wholemeal or more rye bready type bread crust. So you have this kind of bread crusty character in there that is quite sweet but also quite smooth. You've got a layer of kind of rye bread, you have wholemeal brown bread, and then above that you have this almost kind of cakey, like chocolate brownie type character, chocolate brownie, chocolate muffin type notes coming out of this one. Yeah, so lovely chocolate brownie, chocolate muffin type notes in there. It's almost like a kind of brandy soaked chocolate muffin or something like that you're getting out of this beer. And then above that, you've got a mix of like chocolate and different brown sugary characters. So for me, the chocolatey notes that you get out of this are really interesting. It is very much like a like a slightly dry chocolate brownie type note you're getting out of this one, but it doesn't come across as being overly dark and high percentage cocoa. It comes across as being maybe 70% cocoa chocolate, but you do get some lovely milky chocolate elements out of this one, which is potentially due to that to the presence of the vanilla in this one. So the vanilla is also giving you a little bit of kind of like milk chocolatey character to the beer, but then above that you start to get all the big complex brown sugary type characters coming out of the beer. So for me, above the chocolatey notes, and the chocolatey notes incidentally do have a little bit of oiliness but also a little bit of cacao nibby dryness to them, but then above that you get a mix of brown sugars in there. So you're getting some more leathery brown sugars, but I don't think they're leathery in the sense that the beer has been subjected to a kind of longer wort boil. They're still quite sweet, but there's a lot of treacle and molasses in there. There's a good little bit of a more kind of sweet oily caramel, and you've also just got that little touch of biscuit coming out of the beer too. But yeah, that covers the actual malty side of things. The elephant in the room that we've not really mentioned outside of the vanilla, we have looked at the vanilla. For me, the coffee bean in this one's quite interesting. So when it comes to coffee beans, there's, as I say, a very diverse adjunct when it comes to beer. When it comes to coffee beans, it's apparently all about the maso, the metres above sea level at which the coffee bean is grown, because the higher the altitude you have, the more likely you are to get these kind of complex, fruity and aromatic type notes out of the beer. So yeah, the way these things go together in this one is really quite interesting too, because for me the coffee bean is very, very smooth. Like, it's got a lovely little bit of smooth earthiness to it, but you also get a little bit of aromaticity in there, big oily, right, sort of plummy, fruity characteristics as well from the coffee bean. And yeah, so smooth earthiness, light roast, a little bit of aromaticity, and also a big kind of red fruity character in there too. So yeah, that's an interesting point to make about this one. But yeah, I would say that's probably everything we need to mention about the actual coffee bean. So on the hoppy side of the beer, we should say first off that Imperial Stouts are not the most hop forward of beer styles. This beer is, yeah, about 10 years old as well, so a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out, but you still get a little remnant of green component to this one. There's a wee touch of earthiness, a little bit of herbal character. I don't know if we can say floral in this one, but certainly there's a little bit of grassiness in there, which I do really quite enjoy as well. So yeah, a little bit of a green component lingering in this one, and then you do of course have the fruity characters coming out of the beer. So yeah, let's have a little look at those fruity things just to round off the aroma portion of this video. But yeah, when you sugar the beer up in this one, you do get a little bit of that sharper raisin in there. There's also big, oily, juicy plums, drier prunes as well, sitting underneath that. A little bit of a datey character. Definitely some big, oily, figgy notes. And then I've got a lot of blackberry and black currant coming out of this one too. So yeah, the fruity character in this beer is pretty damn good, I have to say, and kind of expected. There's nothing about the aroma of this beer that's unusual, if you like, but it's just a lovely example of the style from that perspective. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of these beers before you get stuck into them, especially when it's something kind of as crazy as this, because this was a very kind of, the Beer Geek series, back at the time that this beer was released, it was a very sort of pioneering side of Mikkeller. But yeah, let's do this. So this one is the Beer Geek Vanilla Shake, a 13% Imperial Coffee Stout from Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery. This beer was, of course, brewed at Lervig Brewery in Stavanger, up in Norway. So yeah, let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. That's pretty damn good. It's the first time I've had an Imperial Coffee Stout that is quite this age. But I tell you something, it's just really interesting to see how the flavour in this beer develops into the aftertaste, because it has got a hell of a kind of bitter, roasty, toasty coffee bean kick to it at the end. But it comes in, and when you actually have the beer side of it, it's lovely and smooth and highly complex. I mean, it's an awesome beer, this one. You can't knock it in the slightest. But yeah, very roasty, toasty, and well-fired bitterness. I like this, so it's a big thumbs up from me. So, for me, it's a case of where to start in terms of describing this beer. And as I said, this one is not barrel aged at all, so this is the proper raw old school beer. So it's an RIS and Imperial Coffee Stout all in one. So the backbone of this beer, you've got that lovely roasty, toasty, well fired black bread crust, just forming the backbone of this beer. If you go further forward on that middle third of your palate, you'll get a little touch of like a smooth, almost slightly oaky, woody character coming out of it, and that works. But on top of that, you get a really nice, what would we say? You get a really nice kind of, I don't know if cracker is the right word, but yeah, above the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, you can feel that there's a good little bit of an almost rye bready character in there, but it's quite a dry rye bready character. So yeah, you've got the roasty, well-fired black bread crust in there, almost like a dry rye bready character. Then above that, you get a slightly sweeter rye bready character. It's a very layered beer, this one, so you get a slightly sweeter rye bready character sitting above that, and then within that rye bready layer you do have a little touch of nuttiness coming out of the beer. And then yeah, above the rye bready layer you start to get this, like, really oily but slightly dry chocolate brownie type note coming out of the beer. So yeah, the drier rye bread, the more oily and dense chocolate brownie layer, and then within the chocolate brownie, yeah, you do get quite a little bit of nutty character. And then above that, you're getting the chocolatey notes. So for me, at the back of that middle third of your palate, above the kind of chocolate brownie layer, at the back of that middle third of your palate, you're getting some really roasty, toasty, almost charred chocolatey notes out of this one. But as you move further forward within that layer, you get a little bit more of a kind of 80-90% cocoa chocolate, and it just mellows out a little bit the further forward you come. But the chocolatey character in this beer is exceptionally dark. That's definitely fair to say. Just really interesting how that pieces together. But above that chocolatey layer, you're starting to get the brown sugars, and for me, the brown sugary layer on this beer is actually slightly thin, but it's quite leathery. You can tell that this beer, I think this beer is probably double mash, just because of the kind of stickiness of the flavours and things, but I think it's also had a little bit of a longer wort boil, because you can really feel that leathery character in the brown sugars there. So yeah, you've got that charred chocolate, you know what I was talking about, the leathery brown sugary layer, and then on top of that, in the dead centre of your palate, you've got this big sort of oily circle there, and you can feel this like treacly molasses type note to it, and it's quite a dry, toasty, treacly molasses character. But in the dead centre of your palate, you do get a little bit of that kind of sweetness coming out of the beer, that more sweet caramelly treacle molasses note coming out of this one. And yeah, I do like how that pieces together. But yeah, it's just interesting with this one. When you first take the beer in, it's actually really quite sweet and very oily, and the fruity characters in there as well. But yeah, it's just interesting how this whole thing dries out, and you can feel the roasty toasty side of the coffee just pushing its way out in this one. But in honesty, I think we've said everything we really need to about the middle third of your palate in this beer. So let's have a little look at the back third of your palate then. As I've said, generally speaking, the further forward you are on the palate, the more sweeter the flavours you're going to get are. But then yeah, the further back on the palate you are, the more the more roasty and toasty and bitter the flavours that you're going to get are. So yeah, that's quite interesting in this one. But what you'll find on the back third of your palate is too that the flavours are quite similar to the middle third of your palate, but they just come out at different intensities. But we should talk about the coffee beans in this one, to be honest with you. So the coffee for me comes out in that border region between middle and back third of your palate. You can feel there's a nice little bit of a kind of rye bready base in there in the border region. Then you've got the more dense cakey type character, and then above that you've got the more kind of coffee bean sort of thing. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. So yeah, for me, the coffee bean's quite interesting because it comes across as being quite roasty and almost charred, so quite a heavy roast in this one. It's quite aromatic at the same time. But this, yeah, you've also got a big, like, sweet plum, juicy plum coming out of that coffee bean as well. So you're quite, as I say, quite heavily roasted, almost dry. Good little bit of earthiness in there. Quite a bright floral note, and then also that big, also that big plummy, juicy plummy sort of thing to it, which I think is great. Like, I really do like how that kind of pieces together. But as I say, the coffee sits in that border region between middle and back third of your palate. So let's move on to the back third of your palate then and just describe that for you. So as was the case in the middle third of the palate, you've got that really roasty, toasty, charred bread crusty character forming the backbone of the beer. Above that, you do get a little touch of an almost crackery note out of this one. Then you've got a kind of rye. You've got the rye bready character, which is quite dry. Then above that, you've got another rye bready layer, which was a little bit more caramelised. And these two layers are quite light and airy. And then above that, you get the more dense, like chocolate brownie, chocolate muffin type layer coming out of the beer. And you can feel some of the coffee elements, some of the more earthy and roasty elements of the coffee bean just kind of creeping over the top of that and giving you a really dry finish on that back third of your palate. Above everything else on that back third of your palate, you do have a little bit of yeasty character, so let's just have a wee look at that as well to round off that back third of the palate. Yeah, the yeasty side of things in this beer is actually really quite sweet, I would say. So above that kind of really dry, bitter, roasty, toasty coffee sort of thing, you can feel there's this really dense, like brandy-soaked fruit loaf type thing. That's your yeasty character. It's got a bit of woodiness to it, It's got a bit of, it's almost like it's wrapped in kind of honeycomb. As I say, it's like a really dense, sweet, brown bready, brandy soaked fruit loaf type thing, and that yeasty flavour sits on top of the kind of charred coffee note on the back third of your palate there. So it's really interesting how that side of things just pieces together. But yeah, definitely you can feel the back third of your palate, the flavour is taller, and then the further forward you come into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, the thing that's interesting, I don't know if we need to say so much more about the malty and yeasty side of things in this one. But yeah, you get a little bit of vanilla out of the beer, but not too much. The vanilla side of things in this one is kind of overpowered a bit by the coffee. I'm not sure how much of that is due to the aging of the beer, but yeah, I'd be interested to know that from a kind of sommelier's perspective. But still, it works. It's a really roasty, toasty, well-fired imperial coffee stout. This, but let's focus on the the hoppy side of things with this beer. Now, as I said earlier, imperial stouts are not the most hop-forward styles of beer. This one's been aged for like 10 years or something, so a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out of it. But that doesn't mean it's undetectable. In the back corners of the palate, you do get quite a little bit of earthiness out of this beer, and it's quite a bitter earthiness, I would say. But you do have a really nice kind of, sort of smoothness out of this one. So you've got the really bitter earthiness there, then it's a bit smoother as you move further forward, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of the palate, you can feel the earthiness and herbal character does spread forward, but then yeah, you've just got that little bit of floral note sitting in there too, which is quite nice. So yeah, for me, yeah, you do get that little bit of floral character just kind of lingering there into the aftertaste, but round the front curve of the tongue, you get a little bit of lighter grassiness, and it's actually quite a wet and almost oily grassiness that comes out of the beer at this point. But I like it. I really do like that about this one. But I think we can focus on the front third of your palate now and just see the kind of fruitier side of the beer. So the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build-up in this one. So you can feel the rye bread in the base, a little bit of the sweeter, kind of more cakey, brandy-soaked fruit loaf above that. Then the base of that front third of your palate is, again, you've got the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, a bit of the crackery note in there, and then the sort of rye bready character that comes out of it as well. Above that, you've got that nice kind of oily bubble where the juicy, fruity esters just roll the way out of the beer, and that in this beer, that's really quite nice. In fact, yeah. So for me, let's I think I get quite a little bit of a kind of datey and pruny, plummy type note out of this one, but let's just go through the fruits a little bit more kind of logically and see what we get. So, for me, when you take the beer in, you've got a little bit of a kind of plummy and pruny type note out of this one. So you get a little bit of the kind of plummy sharpness out of this one, which is nice. Quite a juicy kind of plummy type note there. So yeah, in that back half of that front third of your palate, you're getting big juicy plums. Underneath that, you get the drier prunes and a bit of date underneath that. But then as you move further forward, you can feel a nice juicy kind of oily fig. So yeah, you've got that nice kind of juicy, oily, figgy type character coming out of this one. And then as you push into the front half of that front third of your palate, you've got some juicy kind of black currant underneath, but quite a little bit of a more juicy blackberry sitting on top of that. But yeah, I get the prunes and the plums kind of pushing their way out of this beer. But yeah, behind that you've got a lot of the roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust, the kind of charred bread crust just pushing its way out of the flavour in this one. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is really very, very nice, and that gets a big thumbs up from me. As I said, it's like a very typical old school roasty, toasty Russian Imperial Stout, this one, with a lot of coffee bean added to it. The coffee, it's kind of difficult with this beer because of how it's a very roasty, toasty, bitter affair, this one. And you can kind of tell in a sense that it's from a different era when bitterness was more the norm. Because this beer is, if I think of this compared to modern Imperial coffee stouts, it's really roasty and toasty. But I'd be very curious to know how much of that is due to the aging. So yeah, I like that about this one for sure. So that gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, really curious beer, this one, I have to say, and it's certainly got me thinking a little bit about how Imperial coffee stouts can actually age. Is a lot of the kind of roasty, toasty, well-fired dryness that you're getting out of this one from aging this beer, or is that just the nature of what coffee stouts were back in the day? So yeah, interesting stuff to think about. But yeah, I think we can round off this review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. No doubt in my mind that this beer is full-bodied. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a fairly kind of mid-range level of full-bodied. The carbonation is very, very smooth. It's got a lovely kind of oily slickness to it, which I think is great. So yeah, lovely kind of oily slickness in there, and yeah, it's just the way everything goes together in this one. In terms of IBU count, this beer has to be sort of 80, 90 IBUs. I'd be very surprised if it was lower than that. And some of that's from the black malt in the beer. Some of it's from the coffee bean itself. But yeah, it's quite difficult for me to tell whether this one, I think it maybe has a double mash, but I don't think it's had a particularly long wort boil. You can feel that it's a little bit sticky in its mouthfeel, but it doesn't feel particularly dry. It has got a little, well, it doesn't feel particularly, the brown sugary characters don't feel particularly dry in this one. The thing that surprised me about this beer is that it doesn't show you more of the vanilla character. It is there, but it's not madly obvious until you get further into the aftertaste, to be honest with you. But yeah, as I say, 80, 90 IBUs in this one. The malt base has got roastiness underneath, a bit of smoothness in the middle, some drier sweetness on top of it, and the fruity character in this one has a little bit of sharpness when you take the beer in, but a lot of kind of nice juiciness the further into the flavour that you go. But lots of kind of dark red fruity notes to this one, a little bit of a drier fruity character as well. But overall, this is just a really, really nice beer, and another very interesting addition to the Crazy Beers for 10 Years mini-series that I've been doing for you over the last few videos. But yeah, a 10-year-old Imperial coffee stout with a bit of vanilla from Mikkeller in Copenhagen. Not often you get to see that on the channel. But yeah, once again, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Mikkeller as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again at some point in the very near future. But this one was the Beer Geek Vanilla Shake at 13% ABV. This one had to be released in about 2012 or 2013 if memory serves me correctly. And yeah, 10-year-old aged version. Been very interesting to try. So thank you for watching my beer reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Check out my other reviews, let me know your own thoughts on this one, and check out my social media and check out theirs. Till the next time, Slanja, Skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys very soon. Try some of these Mikkeller Beer Geek series beers if you get the chance.